Hi, I'm Colin Sauze. I'm a senior research software engineer at the National Oceanography Centre. I'm just going to give you a quick update on sort of what I originally planned to do with my fellowship and then how that really went, and then some other projects that have come along that are sort of related to SSI work that weren't at all in my fellowship that I thought people might be interested in hearing about. So I was a 2021 fellow. I also applied in 2019 unsuccessfully and sort of went away and actually did some work towards what I was proposing anyway, and then came back with a more refined proposal in 2021. At the time, I was a research software engineer at Aberystwyth University and the Supercomputing Wales project. And the thing I was noticing a lot was that kind of everyone wanted to do machine learning, but no one really knew how to do it. And there wasn't a great set of open source sort of carpentry style learning material out there. And I thought that was an obvious gap in the market at the time. So I started building a course that introduced some very general high-level machine learning concepts with the scikit-learn library that I then did some work on at the Carpentries Connect in Manchester in 2019, which I think the SSI had a hand in organising at least. And then sort of refine that for the second application. Also, around the time I was applying for the fellowship, the Carpentries put out something called the Course Development Study Group, where every week we meet for about an hour and talk about different aspects of writing Carpentries courses. And we also each had to develop at least one chapter of a course that was sort of part of our homework for that project. And I found that there were other people who were also working on a machine learning lesson on deep learning for that. And instead of sort of going off and doing my own thing, I actually worked with them for that. So there was also worked with a group in Germany and the Netherlands for that process. And thanks to the SSI community for that, where we had to actually do a test run of one of the lessons we'd written. So some of the fellows helped me out when I came to do my sort of practice session. And then I helped teach this course online for the first time at EMBL in Germany, late 2021. I've actually still never taught it at my own institution, only that one, but I've helped with some development sprints since then with the Netherlands eScience Centre. And recently, through the sort of collaboration of a lot of people, this lesson has got quite mature and is now applied to the Carpentries Lab, which is sort of the next stage after the incubator, where lessons sort of graduate to when they're more mature and they've been taught by a few different groups and they've gone through a peer review session. So we're currently going through that review, which thrown up an interesting case that one of the data sets we chose doesn't have a very clear license, and it looks like that although it claimed to have something like Creative Commons, that most of the data in it was actually scraped without the permission of the creators. So we're now going back and looking for an alternate data set that has been made with the permission of its original creators or was made entirely by the people who put it out there. The side effect, though, of that was that my course on scikit-learn maybe didn't get as much attention as I would quite have liked it to have had. It has been taught by a few other groups since, and a couple more times by me. There have been a few external contributions, but I've never quite found enough time to maintain it to the level I would like to. And since then, a whole host of other machine learning courses have appeared, and I actually ran a session at CarpentryCon 2022, where we tried to coordinate the people writing all of these different courses and tried to figure out if there was a common ground between us or where we were duplicating things, but I'm not sure we ever had quite a conclusive thing. And what I've noticed since is maybe what I wrote fits in very well as the my first machine learning type lesson for people who haven't got much background in machine learning, but for people who have done some but now want to learn the ins and outs of one of the libraries. It's not the right course, but I think it still does have a place in there, but its place in the world has narrowed as there's been more courses created. So some other projects that I got involved with since then, a collaborations workshop 2021. I had the idea, along with Dave Horsfall, Arini Zornpa, and Patricia, to create coding confessions where coders would talk about their coding sins that they had made and would confess them either sort of in private in almost a reconstruction of a Catholic confessional where you're in with the priest who absolves you of your sins, or perhaps in a slightly more public environment where there was a small panel of perhaps senior developers who would all come and talk about the mistakes they've made and how not to repeat their mistakes. And we ended up running this as a panel at September RSC, which was the online RSCCon in 2021, and then repeated again at RSCCon 22 in person and RSCCon 23. Some of those confessions, but I don't think quite all of them, have now ended up written up on the Coding Confessions website, and there is a form to fill out more if people want to do them online and make them completely anonymous. And I then got asked by Selena, who was the SSI comms person a while ago, if I'd do a recording for the Code for Thought podcast in their software horror series. And actually, it only just twigged to me the other day that my episode was released on Halloween. I think I actually recorded it in April, but I was the Halloween episode for last year, talking about some experiences when I was a PhD student, and a bug in my code actually caused a piece of lab equipment to catch on fire, is maybe a bit too strong a word, smolder slightly, and smoke came out of it, and it didn't work again afterwards. At the same collaborations workshop in 2021, another idea that really took my fancy, but I decided not to join at the time, was the Carpentries Offline, who were trying to run an entire workshop without internet using a Raspberry Pi or an old laptop. And I'd done some work before on building Raspberry Pi clusters, and I'd written some scripts that would do things like provisioning a Raspberry Pi and setting up software. So I sort of had a lot of skills in that area that I wanted to contribute to that. So I ended up joining the project afterwards and working with them a bit more. And this has been an interesting project because it's been something that's never had any kind of official funding or any real time carved out for it. So it's kind of ended up being a set of software development by hackathon. And there's been sort of 3 distinct, at least, hackathons that have made, I wouldn't say large contributions, but they've made a big contribution to it. So the first one was one run out of CERN called the Port Hackathon in October 2021, which had a really, really diverse range of groups, and all trying to do something that was sort of humanitarian in nature. And we ended up with a very multinational team with people as far afield, I think, as Pakistan and I think India, as well as a few in Switzerland and a few in the UK, who all contributed to this project. And one thing that came out of that was trying to automate the process of building up the image for that, which felt like we had it 90% done at the hackathon, and then probably put in 4 times as much work again to make that really work. Then at RSCCon 22 was actually the first time that any of the team got together in person, and we sort of hacked on this in the background. We used RSCCon as a way of testing things out with large numbers of people. So we were asking anyone who happened to see our access point to come and connect to it, and just seeing how many users we could get on there simultaneously, and accosting a few random people with interesting looking operating systems on their laptops to see how it looked on their machines and if things worked. And then at RSCCon 23, there was actually a hackathon track, and we applied for that, and we're the only hackathon in that. So we managed to get a room full of people doing testing and showing things off to them, and got quite a few bugs sorted. Unfortunately, that was only a half-day event, and one thing we learned is that a half-day hackathon is quite difficult to get anything done if you're trying to onboard people who've never been part of your project before. Trying to do that in half a day and then get them to make a reasonable contribution is quite difficult. Some of the stuff we brought along with us with the equipment, we just about got booted up and working by the end of the hackathon. We didn't really have any time to actually make any contributions to that. So if I was going to do that again, I'd like to have at least 1 day, if not 2, to do it. And another project that's sort of come out of my time with the SSI and from my fellowship is at Collaborations Workshop last year. I had this idea of time shifting computing to when the electricity grid is greener, as in producing, I suppose, less greenhouse gases from the burning of fossil fuels. And some others had also had similar thoughts, and we all got together first in one of the discussion sessions, and then forming a hack day idea, which we called CATS, the Climate Aware Task Scheduler, that would look up the carbon intensity of the power grid. You gave it an estimated time for how long you thought a piece of code was going to take to run, and it would then time shift it to start at the point where the grid carbon intensity was lowest. And we won first place for that one. And we've then continued a bit of development since. We've cleaned up the code. We're just about on the verge of making our version 1.0 release. And then late last year, the SSI also came to us and asked if we'd actually like to continue this work and offered some more funding. And we're now just starting up doing that. And we're going to build a version that's more friendly for high performance computing, making use of the Slurm scheduler that you'll find on many HPC systems instead of the very basic AT scheduler that we use that dates back to I think the 1970s or 80s from very early Unix days. I sort of realised early this year, as probably many people did, I needed to spend my fellowship money that I hadn't spent a lot of. So I went to FOSDEM, which is the biggest conference of open source, possibly in the world, definitely in Europe. They don't have exact numbers because they don't require registration. It's a completely open event. They estimated from Wi-Fi devices that they had about 11,000 people there. And they have around about 30 different tracks. And there's a couple of pictures down there of the opening keynote, which is by no means everyone who was at FOSDEM. But I also went along with Janetta and Abhishek, who both also worked with me on Carpentries Offline, and Abhishek has worked on CATS, and we presented both of those projects. Janetta also is very good at 3D printing and 3D printed us a set of Carpentries tools. So you probably can't read it on here, but the blue plastic hammer says sudo on it. And I did suggest that she make a saw that said RM, but she didn't get that far. But she also did these whole belts and a QR code and a protractor and all sorts of other things. So we had a very distinctive Carpentries identity that we could walk around FOSDEM with. And I don't know how many of you have ever been to FOSDEM, but it's a very relaxed conference, and you often see people in some kind of costume for their open source project. So for instance, the VLC developers walk around with traffic cone hats. The Red Hat developers actually have red fedoras, and Debian project for some reason are known for wearing kilts. We didn't quite go that far. So that's it for my update. I mean, there's many other things I've been doing in my professional job, but these are sort of things that are relevant to the SSI community. So if there's any questions, please ask.
Thank you very much. Are there any immediate questions?
I see that SSI uniforms and requests that we wear these things at Collaborations Workshop. I think we may bring them to Collaborations Workshop.
Yeah, I think you should, yeah.
Have I got them? No. I don't know where I've actually put them. I should show them off in more detail.
Yeah, no, that looks great. The conference, Austin, that sounds, you said it's pretty laid back, but it sounds pretty big.
Yes, it's huge and chaotic because it's totally, well, not totally self-organizing, but very volunteer-led. There's nobody really employed to run it. So there's a load of separate, what they call dev rooms, and each dev room kind of has its own organizer, and then you apply direct to those for that, or you can go in the main track where the sort of key FOSDEM staff run things. Okay. So we were both in the open research dev room for the Carpentries talk and the HPC one for the CATS talk.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And so, yes, Yo was, of course, one of the organizers of the open research dev room.
I'd love to come. It sounds pretty amazing. I'm used to the biggest in my field from the humanities was the Society for Renaissance, the RSA, where you had hundreds of talks over 3 days. But that was a bit of a circus, but it wasn't as big as FOSDEM. I had a question.
I claim the biggest because I think there are some big conferences that have more attendees, but perhaps fewer speakers or fewer tracks.
I had a question about CATS. So in the development of CATS, you say you're entering the next phase, but where actually do you see who gets the most benefit of using CATS? Is it institutions or individuals, and how do you plan to sort of approach them?
So there's a few there. I mean, the individual, if they want to feel that they are doing something to reduce the impact of their science upon the environment. At the moment, nobody's really got to the point of having carbon accounting, but that is something that a lot of places are talking about doing. So that may then come back to you can get more science done if you can time shift it to the times when the carbon intensity of the grid is lower. The institutions obviously could also use that to not just reduce their carbon intensity, but also the cost of their electricity, because there are now variable rate electricity tariffs, or if you've got your own solar or wind farm, then you could actually use that, use CATS to then going concert with that and reduce your electricity usage, or to time it when you're producing your own electricity. And also UKRI are pushing this sort of thing quite heavily. So there's a big sort of net zero digital research infrastructure push coming from UKRI, and we hope that it will end up being part of that.
So are you already engaging with those groups, or?
We're engaging with quite a few people who run HPC systems at the moment. We ran a scoping workshop last year to try and gather some of those people who would then volunteer their systems for us to test things out on. And then sort of with the results from that, we can then start pushing that towards the UKRI level.
Okay.
But we actually need to write some code that works first.
Maybe it. No, it's a very interesting project. Very useful as well. So I can see the benefits for a lot of different people. Are there any other questions?
I had a question. You talked about the Carpentries incubator on machine learning, and is that, you mentioned its current state, is that still being actively developed and worked on, or?
My particular lesson, or the Carpentries incubator as a whole?
Oh, not your particular lesson, the one on machine learning, intro to machine learning.
It's still in the incubator. I haven't had a chance to teach it in over a year. Some other people have. There's still the odd pull request that comes through to it, but it's not had too much activity. But it's certainly still available for anyone who wants to teach it. I don't think there'd be anything that would be invalidated by anything recent in there.
Okay, cool, thank you.
I know that Alex has a lesson on the incubator as well. So if you're ever interested in, I think they're trying to get it into the official curriculum as well. So if you're ever
the process is you start in the incubator, then you get to beta stage, which I think is where a few other people have taught it, and you've had some review. Then you go to the Carpentries lab, and then when you finish from the lab, you go to being an official lesson.
Yeah.
I think to date there's about 150 lessons in the incubator, about 10 in the lab, and I think possibly one has graduated all the way through to the official curriculum.
Yeah, I'm just aware that Alex was also looking, had a lesson in that incubator and was looking to advance it. So it might be useful to share ideas there, experiences. But thank you very much. Were there any other questions? No. Thank you again.